Hey y'all, this is Tiffany, Txbassbabe, coming to you with kastking to tell you a little bit about Texas rig fishing today. So Texas rigging is one of my very favorite styles of fishing because it is so versatile and can be used in a wide variety of different conditions. And it can be fished with many different types of lures and in many different ways. Today in this video, if you're a beginner, if you're new to Texas rig fishing, this is a great video for you. I'm going to walk you through step by step how to rig up a Texas rig. Today I will be fishing with my Royale Legend Elite reel. This is a faster reel. It's an 8:1:1 gear ratio. You don't need a bait caster that is that fast to fish a Texas rig, but I like to use this one. This is what I typically fish mine on. I'm using 20-pound Flourocarbon, the Kovert Flourocarbon from Kastking. If you're fishing more clearer water, you may want to use a smaller diameter line. The pond that I'm fishing today has a lot of cover, so I want to be able to make sure I can rip through my Texas rig if it gets stuck in any of that brush. I'm also using my Royale Select. It's fast action, a medium heavy rod. This is a 6'6" rod. One of the things about Texas rigging is that you can fish it on a spinning reel as well. I've used my Sharky 3 many times to fish a Texas rig. Typically with that, I'll use a smaller diameter line. I'll use a finesse braid to a fluorocarbon leader. And so that is one option that you have when fishing a Texas rig if you want to fish it on a spinning reel. So let's go through how you rig it up. You're gonna need 3 basic components. The first is a bullet weight. I use a wide variety of bullet weights depending on the conditions that I'm fishing. Typically for a pond like this, I may use a 3/16. This happens to be a 1/4 ounce, which sometimes can be a little bit big for these ponds, but like I said, this one has a lot of cover, so I want to make sure I can punch through. You also need a hook. This is a 3/0 extra wide gap hook. You will want for your Texas rig to use an extra wide gap hook. I typically will use either a 3/0 or a 4/0, again, depending on my conditions. And then you need a bait. Like I mentioned earlier, Texas rig fishing, very, very versatile. So you can use a stick bait. This is a Yamamoto Senko, which this happens to be one of my favorite colors as well. I also love to fish ribbon tail worms, kind of a large. This is a Zoom, big old monster. But I like to fish a ribbon tail worm on a weighted Texas rig as well. Or you can use a creature bait. So there's a wide variety of things. You know, I fish craws, all kinds of other types of creature bait, lizards, but that's why it's very versatile. I'm going to show you how to rig it up. The traditional Texas rig includes a bullet weight. However, you can also rig it weightless. So you can rig it just with the hook and do it the exact same way. With Senkos, I like to fish them weightless sometimes and weighted other times depending on my conditions. But it's the exact same rig minus the bullet weight. So keep that in mind if you're new to this and you hear a weightless Texas rig or a weightless rig with an extra wide gap hook, that's what they're talking about. It's basically a Texas rig minus the bullet weight. So let's rig it up and I'll show you how it's done. So you take your line, you're going to thread your bullet weight with the point up. And the reason you want that point up is because if you have cover, you want it to be able to punch through. Now, some people like to put a stopper and pin their bullet weight. That way it doesn't slide up and down your line. It really depends, again, on the conditions that you're fishing. If you're trying to punch through a lot of cover, you may want to have that stopper. I typically like to have mine free falling. So next, you're going to take your extra wide gap hook. You're going to thread it through. There's a variety of knots that you can tie. I personally have always tied this rig with a fisherman's knot, just a classic, some people call it a clinch knot, but I'll show you how to do that here. You thread your line through like so, and then you're going to wrap it around the line. Some people do it 7, some people do it 5. I typically do 5. I'm going to show you what I mean. You're just going to wrap it around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You may want to wet your line to lock in that knot. You come through the bottom loop and then back through the other loop. So you should end up looking like that. And then you'll want to cinch it all down. So I typically bite the tag to pull it out as I cinch it down to make sure it cinches all the way down to the hook. And your knot should cinch all the way down to your hook. And you should have like a neat, let's see if I can get that on camera, a neat little stack of your knot. If the knot doesn't look like that, you'll want to retie it because the integrity of the knot will not be good. And then I always like to pull mine a few extra times, make sure it's cinched all the way down, just to make sure I have a good knot. I have not had issues with this knot breaking. I know there are a variety of other knots, polymer and other things that you can do the same rig using those knots. So if you prefer one of those, do what your heart desires. Once you have your knot tied, the next step, you're going to want to put on your Senko. I'm going to be using a red shad Senko. This is one of my favorite colors. I fish it in all different kinds of conditions, in clear water, stained water, but it's never failed me yet. So the key to a Texas rig is you want the very little top part of your extra wide gap hook. You want this part covered with the tip of your Senko. So you're going to thread your worm in about 1/4 of an inch. And then you slide it down. And here is the little bit tricky part. You're going to turn it. So you should have the top. I like to have my knot covered too, just so my bullet weight's not hitting on that knot. And then you have a loose hook. Now you want to measure that up, and right where the bottom of that is, that's where you're going to poke it through. So you poke it through your Senko and back out like so, and now you have an exposed hook and the tip of it covered. Now I like to fish mine weedless. You can fish it like this, and if you're fishing in a pond or a lake where there's not a lot of cover on the bottom, there's not allowed to snag, I have fished it this way, but like today I said I'm fishing where there's a lot of cover, and so you can make it weedless by you pull the worm and you just barely put the tip of that Senko into the worm like so. You don't want to poke it into it too far, because if you do that you won't be able to get a good hook set. You just want to cover the tip so that way it's smooth, so you're not snagging things on the bottom of the pond. Okay? And so your rig at the end should look like this. All right, let's go fish it. So like I mentioned earlier, there's a variety of ways that you can fish a Texas rig. One technique is to give it little pops. So you let it sink all the way to the bottom, and then you just give a pop. I usually do like a little 1-2, and it's a very subtle movement. It's not like a big pop. It's just a tiny little like twitch, where you pop the Senko up off the ground. Another way that you can do it is just by twitching it along the bottom. Sometimes I just let it sit there and I'll give it a little twitch, especially if I know that it's an area, like if it's a channel or something I know bass commonly swim through. Sometimes I'll just let it dead stick there and then give it a little twitch every now and then, hoping I get a bite. Bass will hit it a lot of times on the fall, but then there's other times that they'll hit it and they'll want to pick it up off the ground. So you just kind of got to play around with it. Usually when I'm starting off, I'll just kind of fish it different ways to see what the bass like. Another technique you can do is just to slow roll it on the bottom. You literally just let it sink all the way to the bottom and give it a little reel and give it a little reel. You know, just slowly. My favorite way to do it is to pop it up, but that's not always what the bass want. Let me clean mine off real quick. I was slow rolling it, and this is not really the right pond to do that in because this one has a lot of muck at the bottom. And so when you slow roll it like that, it kind of catches everything. One other technique that you can do is a sweeping motion, where you just kind of sweep it and let it fall. Sweep it and let it fall. And it's not a huge movement, it's just kind of moving that tip of your rod up where it sweeps that bait up and it gives it more of an angle. Whereas the little pops just make it go up and down. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop a comment below and we will get back to you. If you have enjoyed this video and you would like to see more like it, hit that like, hit that subscribe to the Kastking channel and Txbassbabe channel. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you soon.